Hello, I'm Linda Crosfield. I write poetry, and I will start by reading a poem about why I write poetry. This is called Foiled. The year I turned 16, the need for cash and clothing drove me to find a job, so after school and Saturdays I trudged the stairs to Dr. Conybeare's, typed invoices, answered the phone, called the reluctant to remind of appointments they mostly preferred to forget. I learned to develop x-rays, sterilize instruments in the autoclave, put everything away in its proper little drawer, then moved on to more exciting stuff, rinsing stained and drooling mouths, providing tissues, taking them away. Once I stuck the suction tube right on the back of Gary Ridgemore's tongue. He'd wrecked my playhouse when we were kids. I loved how it made him gag, the fleeting terror in his eyes. I never got the hang of mixing silver amalgam. Mine was always too thick, too thin, too late, until Dr. Conybeare clicked his tongue against his perfect teeth and made his own. First time I saw a full-mouth extraction, the room eclipsed to black, I slid discreetly down the wall, which upset the patient more than what was happening in his head. Abandoned plans to be a nurse, took to writing poetry instead. So, one of the things that you can do when you're writing poetry is you can explore just about it. There's nothing that you can't write about. You can write about, right now there's an iguana sunning himself on the patio just out of frame here, and I could write a poem about him. You can write about friends, you can write about anything, food. I sometimes use poetry to explore family. For example, this one is called Whirlwind. Lyra waits until she's 2 to snatch a poem out of me. Before that, she's too busy learning to be Lyra, learning to be a little sister, at least as complicated as figuring out how to be a big one. She's got it down now. The cat, to his credit, doesn't disappear when she yanks his ear. At dinner with a new medley of family, she drinks juice, fingers the fish, then pinches her sister at bedtime, stout whirlwind in bare feet and a dreamcoat dress, tearing off to disrupt the rest of everybody's lives. And continuing on the family vein, this is one that I wrote because of a memory I had of an event during my childhood, and I wasn't quite sure what happened or how it happened, but this story kind of evolved out of the memory, which was of seeing my dad sitting on the basement stairs, just looking glum. It's called Halfway Down He Stares, and there's a refrain in it that is after a poem by A. Milne of Christopher Robin fame, called Halfway Down the Stairs. So, halfway down the stairs is a stair where I sit. Just before a special dinner, with guests and linen napkins and eating in the dining room, your mother, frantic, furious, calls your father to go and get an extra leaf for the table from the basement. Or she wants him to bring up a bag of ice from the freezer. Or she wants him to get that bloody old chair out of the way. Just put it in the basement if you're not going to use it. But he doesn't answer. She asks you to get a can of Campbell's mushroom soup from the cupboard above the stairs. Halfway down the stairs is a stair where I sit. The door is ajar and you look down to the basement you're a little afraid of, with its tiny, sooty window, and the gun cupboard you're never to open, though you know the key's on top, and the crawl space behind the furnace, where once you saw your father disappear and you were sure he'd get stuck and never come out until he was bones. And there he is, your father, sitting halfway down, just like in the poem he reads you, shoulders hunched, head in his hands, and somehow you know not to bother him. Somehow you know this isn't a game. There isn't any other stair quite like it. There isn't any other stare that excludes like the stare of a brown study man with his head in his hands, and you mustn't intrude, for suddenly you understand with a clarity that reverberates through decades that everyone gets sad, so sad sometimes, so halfway down the stairs sad there's nothing you can do but quietly back away from the door, retrieve the can of Campbell's mushroom soup, and when your mother asks if you've seen your father anywhere, you say no, he isn't really anywhere, he's somewhere else instead. Later, the guests arrive, everything seems fine. Your father carves the turkey, your mother pours the wine. And later still, when the guests have gone and everyone's in bed, you go downstairs, hide the key, put a penny there instead. One of the other things that you probably may find yourself doing if you get into this poetry writing thing is that it's a way of looking at and dealing with current events and politics. There's never any lack of things to deal with there. This one is called Why I'm Not Looking for the Cat. This morning's email begins with stern admonitions. North Korea is about to send a missile somewhere. It would like it to be the USA, but will probably have to settle for South Korea. Next, the first of what will turn out to be several daily forwards of things to look at, from a friend so dear I don't call him on it, as if I have the time or inclination to find the cat in the picture of a huge mound of discarded crap, refrigerator doors, washing machine tubs, weed eaters, bird feeders, carburetors, strollers, and that's just the stuff I can identify, but not the cat, which is probably not a dead cat, as you might expect in such a monstrous midden, but one licking its paw or its asshole. Also in today's mail is a link to a poetry site, where I read a poem by an angry young man who's upset by the way my generation has raped Mother Earth. Well, yes, we have, as did the generation before us, and before that us, and before that, take it right back to the first ooze of life that crawled out of the sea, or God's finger if you subscribe to that particular theory. What's surprising is that the planet is still here, still forcing life from shivering ground, still casting snow on the mountains, still bravely putting out buds on wintered trees, so we'll all, the buds, the trees, the shivering ground, have something to drink when the sun comes out. The next poem is the first poem I ever had published in a magazine, which was pretty exciting. It's about a group of friends of mine who died of AIDS, and it's called The Quilt. Daniel arrives at the airport wearing a floor-length gown. It's Halloween, first time we've met. I've heard so much about him. A Christmas card arrives from Dawn, scared, might have AIDS, waiting for results. I remember his orange Mustang, how we rode top down through the Gatineau Hills, radio blasting, wind in our hair. Another letter comes. He's all right. Christmas is safe. Now every year, when cards begin to drift in with the snow, I look for his. And Daniel, sweet Daniel, delights in my infant son, laughs with him, loves him, hugs him and holds him until he falls asleep in Daniel's arms. I come across a red and white ceramic ashtray, a gift from Mark the night he and his lover threw a party. We danced and sang. I saw forever in their eyes, but that was many years ago, and the ashtray has a chip on one side. Mark went home to Newfoundland, weighed 90 pounds when he died. Daniel looks at me over my baby's head, says he's an old soul, he will teach you. Blaine lies, tubes everywhere, in a Shaughnessy hospital bed. Wearing her latex armor, a nurse comes in to change the bag that collects his urine. She does not pull the curtains as if his privacy no longer matters. It does to me, so I look away, busy myself with his plants, the only signs of life left in the room. After she leaves, I talk about mutual friends, take his hand, say goodbye. No, I really mean it. Daniel sits beside my son. They're deep in concentration. Make a horse, make it run, says my son. And Daniel draws on command. These latter-day lepers fill bed after bed after bed in this place where I wait to see Daniel. When I'm told he's asleep, I write him a note, say I'm sorry to miss you, a strange thing to say when the person I've missed is dying by inches and I'm going home on the plane the next day. Daniel arrives at the end of his life wearing a hospice gown. I think of him now as part of a quilt that stretches as far as I want to see, shimmering starlight, pieced with tears and stitched together with love. The Canadian government has, interestingly enough, been trying to remove asbestos, which is a known carcinogen, from buildings, and people have to go in with hazmat suits on and all this kind of stuff, and yet we still export it to other countries where they don't necessarily handle it as safely as they should, which is what this next poem is about. What's best for us? Chrysotile sounds like a semi-precious stone, an island off the coast of South America, the name of an exotic dancer, and in a way it is the way it skips on the edge of breath to unsuspecting lungs where it clings like a pole dancer in tights adorned with feathers, while suits in the audience quaff drinks, count money, convinced they know what's best for us. Sometimes you just, the whole thing about poetry is that it's about language, it's about words and combining them together in different ways and just having fun with the language. And sometimes poems arise from doing just exactly that, just playing. And this is one of those poems. This is called Salty Meringue Madness and the Traveling Fair. Tattoos forget how first the skin looks chewed, angry, tiny lines shrieking red as though someone forgot to close the window that faces the sun, while an ancient speaker crackles, rips through a cascade of songs, and the merry-go-round reels from the weight of carried laughter. Mothers bake, grandchildren ridicule each other, and giggling girls show up with stories best forgotten. Ponytails a-twirl in the carny lights. Far from the city, horses at the edge of the ocean wince as waves whip themselves to salty meringue madness, a crown for driftwood that arrives each day with the tide. Somewhere a piece of jade admits to loving glacier-fed lakes for their color. Somewhere a stream escapes the rains of its banks and rushes off to sea. Somewhere a sun studies the perfect sandwich, chunks of bread and cheese coming together like a kiss. As you can see, I'm somewhere not in the Kootenays. I'm actually down in a little village called La Manzanilla in Mexico. It's wonderful to be down here in the winter, and I think it would be appropriate, therefore, to read a couple of Mexico poems. The other thing is when you travel, you get all kinds of fodder for different things, too, to write about. So I'll read you a couple of Mexico poems. This one is called Tethered. Pufferfish litter the low-tide sand, frigate birds float above the sea, fair-weather kites tethered to earth by strings of hunger held taut by fish they seek. One circles, dives, comes up with silver in its mouth, small change for a hungry bird working the cavernous sea. And this one is called Just Before Dusk. Dogs race waves, chase shorebirds they didn't want to catch. Joy and abundance amplified by every wagging tail. Sun throws down a golden path on which we float. Pelicans sit on boats abandoned to the tides. Something in the sand loves my ankles the way I love the brown-eyed boy in the Zocalo, smiling safe in his father's arms. If this is all there is, it is enough. And sometimes you can write really short poems. Haiku, for example, or just you can try to get a lot said into as few words as possible. So I'll close with this one. It's called Mango Dirge. I will bring mangoes to your wake. Bring a page of every book you loved. You were the one who told me I could dance. Thank you very much.